In this video, I'm going to talk about 4 steps that you can take to create a life that you love. Starting with step number 1, the questioning step. The best decisions I've ever made to change my life have come from this mindset of relaxed curiosity. They have not come from a mindset of insistence, urgency, I need to fix, change, do something. Which is why step number 1 is the questioning step. This step is all about getting curious about what you really want in life, but in a very relaxed way. There should be no pressure, no insistence to change. On the screen, I'm gonna list a few questions that you can use while you're in this step. And what you wanna do with these questions is you wanna start taking them on walks. You wanna journal on these questions for 10 minutes before bed. You wanna daydream on these questions throughout your day. The way I like to approach these questions is instead of puzzling over them and pushing for answers, I use this idea from the Little Book of Being where I just sort of drop the questions in my mind and then I wait to see what comes up. Treat it kind of like you're dropping a pebble into a pond and noticing the ripples. Some of the things that you find yourself wanting may not be logistically or physically possible, and that's so fine. Regardless, there is something deeply freeing and mind-opening about admitting to yourself what you want, even if what you want is out of reach. Admitting what you want to yourself is always better than lying to yourself, which is what it's really easy to fall into the pattern of doing. Step number 2, designing your ideal days. So I remember a really long time ago, someone was like, hey, what is your perfect ideal day? And on the spot, I was like, probably brekkie at my favorite brekkie spot, a little book, some time in the sun, maybe a nature walk. Absolutely nothing that was out of reach. And they had asked that same question to a bunch of people and they found the exact same thing. Most people have really doable, really accessible, perfect, ideal days. Sometimes creating a life that you love does involve taking radical action, making big decisions. But one of the first small steps that I would tell someone who wanted to create a life that they love would be to start adding in more good days, or more good mornings, or more good afternoons, or more good lunch breaks, depending on what time you have available for you. To take action on this, just write a list of all of your favorite things, your favorite people, favorite places, favorite activities, the things that when you do them, you reliably feel better. And then when you get to pockets of free time, whether that's the weekend or just an afternoon after work, start getting into the habit of actually sitting with yourself and asking, what would feel fun right now? What would be a really enjoyable way to spend this afternoon or this weekend? What would feel like a good time? And use your lists for reference. Then follow the answers that come to you. You can create a life you love simply by just asking those questions more regularly. You don't need to tear everything down and rebuild again. If you want to expand your mind, have fun, get out of your comfort zone, one way to spend those free pockets of spare time is with Lingoda, the sponsor of today's video. I tried out Lingoda a few years ago to learn a little bit of Spanish and I can remember being so nervous. I'm about to go into my very first Lingoda Spanish class. We're starting from the very basics. I feel a little uncomfortable. I feel a little nervous. I think that even speaking in front of a group in English isn't my favorite thing to do, but that's why I feel like it's gonna be really good for me. Not only do I want to learn Spanish, I also just want to be uncomfortable. This is my first Lingoda group class, so I'm gonna learn how to greet people in the classroom and say goodbye. I was definitely the worst person in the class. Everyone else, they knew everything. Next time I'm gonna pre-study. I feel like I really learned a lot in that class. It put me out of my comfort zone a lot. I'm sweating, but very good for me, very off-brand. And the group classes are 5 people and under, so it keeps it really intimate. You can ask lots of questions. Plus you have a native level speaking teacher. I was shocked at how quickly I learned within such a short space of time. So today I have another Spanish lesson on Lingoda. Even though on Lingoda it's pretty inexpensive, just having access to someone who is like a fluent Spanish speaker, it's such a valuable thing. So I kind of want to have a bit of pre-knowledge so I'm getting the most out of the class. And hopefully this time, maybe I won't be the worst in the class. We'll see how I go. Wait for it, you guys. I'm gonna be a Spanish speaking queen. It's gonna be incredible. So you can open the annotated lesson material before you enter the class. So if you want to feel super prepared, you can. You can also check out the words and phrases of the lesson, grammar tips. A little bit of prep goes a long bloody way. I was so much better in that class. I felt so much more confident. I feel like Lingoda isn't just designed to help you learn a new language, it's also designed to help you to get comfortable speaking a new language with other people. Since it's so interactive and so immersive, you get stuck in it, you start chatting to people like you might if you were in another country. I pressed pause on my Spanish journey, but if I were to ever pick it up again, if I wanted to travel somewhere and I really wanted to get comfortable learning a new language, I would go to Lingoda. There are 3 different ways that you can learn on Lingoda. One way is the Lingoda Sprint. This is something that you guys loved when I talked about it last time. It's a 2-month challenge to accelerate your language learning journey, so you're really going at it. You take classes daily or every other day. And if you finish the sprint and you follow the rules, you earn 50% of your money back, or even more class credits. Then there is Lingoda Teams. So this is more like if you would attend a community college and learn a language. Fixed times, set lessons, the same teacher, the same classmates. Or if you're someone who really leans towards flexibility, there's Lingoda Flex. That is what I went through the first time that I used Lingoda. There's over 800,000 classes happening on Lingoda each year. You can book in 24/7, so no matter what time zone you're in, you're good. Lingoda has also created a curriculum. You have a guided path towards learning your language of choice from these languages. When you sign up to a class, there are class resources that you can go through. So spend like 10-15 minutes going over those before the class. That way you feel a little bit more prepped and ready. Plus you've got your own solo study time. They totally design the curriculum, so you don't have to do any thinking. They guide you through it. If you sign up to Lingoda Flex using my link down in the description below, you'll get 20 euros or your country's equivalent and up to 20 free private classes when you register. Use that link down in the description below. So now let's talk about step number 3 of creating a life that you love, which is making more strategic choices. A lot of the times, an inability to change your life comes down to a lack of willingness to make strategic choices. It comes down to being too scared to make any bets on potential futures because you kind of want it all, or you're just not willing to accept any trade-offs. And I say that as someone who has put off many strategic decisions, to be so clear. So Carl Pwellen wrote this article about how when he started his 30s, he had all of these goals that he wanted to achieve. And every year he'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna achieve those goals, until he reached the end of his 30s and realized that he hadn't ticked anything off of his list. So in his 40s, he made a strategic decision. He still had his list of goals and projects, but every year he would just pick 2 of them. He achieved more in the first 5 years of his 40s than in his 30s altogether. This is an example of a strategic choice. Strategic choices are not plans, they're not to-do lists, they're not even projects. Strategic choices are bets on potential futures. They often involve a risk, some kind of trade-off. So Carl, in this case, made a trade-off. He decided that he would focus on just one goal every 6 months. That meant that there was potential that he would pick the wrong goal, the goal that would flop. He could never know for sure what goal was going to be a winner. He had to make a strategic, risky choice. So a strategic choice is always a choice where you are giving up something in order to get something else that is better. That's how Roger Martin describes it, who is an expert in strategy. So here are some examples of strategic life choices. Giving up diet culture in favor of intuitive eating. In making that choice, you give things up. You give up fitting in. People will cheer on diet culture any day of the week. But you're doing that in order to get something better, which is a healthier relationship with eating, a body that feels energized and fueled. Another example of a strategic choice is quiet quitting so that you can focus on building a business in your 5 to 9. You're giving up on potential promotions and exceeding in your role to get something better, which is your own business and freedom. Another example of a strategic choice is one that my partner made in his late 20s. So he decided to do a university course, which meant that he gave up time, he gave up money, to get something better, which was a job in a field that he enjoyed with a higher income, which leads to the next step. Rewiring your brain for better emotional regulation skills. One of the best things that I have ever done for my life to make it feel lighter and more magical has been spending a chunk of time doing the kind of boring work of emotional regulation. And you can start building your emotional regulation skills so easily with an almost 2-second habit. Whenever you do this habit, you want to think of it like lifting a weight. It is a rep, and your reps might be spread all throughout your day, but if you're doing 20 reps a day, you are going to build strength quickly. And this habit is an evidence-based habit of labeling. So in one helpful study out of UCLA, they had a bunch of people do an impromptu speech, a really easy way to trigger a lot of emotions. Half the people doing these features were told to label their inner experiences. So I feel angst in my throat. I feel heat in my palms. The other half weren't told to do anything special. The people who labeled their experiences had less activity in their amygdala, the part of the brain that tends to react when there are threats to your sense of self or your stability feels under threat. And they also reported feeling more at ease during their speeches, whereas the people who felt their feelings the most deeply out of the group, but who didn't label them, they actually had more angst than anyone in the group. And that's because labeling creates this step back. It helps you to experience your emotions without being in them. You're not letting them take the wheel, but you're letting them exist. This is something that you can do whenever you notice that your mind is going down an unhelpful thinking path. So you might label your experiences. So like the study, I'm feeling tightness in my chest. You could label your cognitive distortion. So, oof, I'm mind reading. I'm acting like a psychic. Some people find it helpful to label their emotions, but there is some evidence that labeling your emotions can crystallize them. So by labeling your emotions, you might actually stop them from being able to evolve and change with ease, which is what emotions tend to do, rather than regulating them and giving them space to evolve and change. Or you can even create your own fun labels for your thoughts. If you have a lot of insecure thoughts about a particular area of your life, think of those thoughts like songs on an album and name the album. Give the album a cute, fun, interesting cover that you can think of whenever those thoughts come up. And when those thoughts appear, you can be like, oh, it's the Me, Myself, and I album she's playing. Which brings me to step 4 of creating a life that you love, which is to stop thinking so much about yourself. A few months ago, the influencer Jemima Kirk had someone ask her, hey, do you have any advice for insecure young women? And she replied, I think that you guys might be thinking about yourself too much. And the internet really took it and ran. And that's because it's great advice. So much of the self-growth world is so self-focused, and I'm including everything that I talk about. I'm not the exception. You think a lot about yourself. You think a lot about your feelings, why you are the way you are, how you can do better. And it can be exhausting, and it can also lead you to feeling worse if you're doing it in a way that leans towards rumination. There is such a fine line between intentional reflection, curious, interested, relaxed, like, what do I want to change about my life? And excessive rumination, which has been shown to measurably make your life worse, is a contributor in all mental health problems. And one way that you can find a balance is to use a worry postponement technique. So pick one time a week where you do all of your self-focused thinking. That could be a nice little Sunday morning. That's where you get mindful and curious when it comes to you, your life, what you want, who you want to be. And whenever you get a self-focused thought, usually it'll sound something like this. Oh man, like I'm not doing enough exercise. Why am I struggling to exercise so much? What is that feeling? Ugh, like I feel like trash. I feel like I shouldn't feel like this quite as often as I do. Why do I feel this way? Etc. And when those thoughts appear, you want to write them down in a list. You might label them, like we talked about, to separate yourself from them. You'll find by the time Sunday morning rolls around, you won't care to think about half the things that were on that list because they were problems that your mind made up when it was in a bad mood and it was producing low quality thoughts. And the problems you do want to think about, you'll be able to approach from this light, curious, at ease perspective with less self-focused thinking and rumination. If you liked this video, I recently made a video on how to change your life in 6 months. It has some really actionable steps that you can take if you are on a journey to create a life that you love. I'm gonna have that linked on the screen as well as down below. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you soon.